The scientific proof of God is an empirical demonstration of God's existence possible. The presentation explains what it is required to empirically verify God's existence. The scientific proof of God explains what is science, what is a scientific proof, who or what is God, what would such an experiment entail, will there be a control group, can the experiment be falsified, who will conduct the experiment, how will we know if the proposition is verified or not. What is science? Science in its simplest form is simply the effort of man to understand nature. A more developed explanation defines science as a method by which knowledge is verified using controlled observation experimentation. Experimentation is a methodical way of verifying that what one observes is as one interpreted it. Science is divided into three branches: natural, social, and formal. Empirical science is based on belief that knowledge comes from the five senses and that knowledge must be verified by experiment. Scientific research. Scientific research involves using the scientific method. This method is mankind's way of explaining observations in a reproducible manner. A hypothesis is created as a preliminary explanation. Parsimony and consilience are important elements when constructing a hypothesis. Hypotheses generate falsifiable predictions testable by experiment. Experiments try to simulate natural events under controlled conditions. Predictions are posted before the experiment as proof that no tampering has occurred. Disproof of a prediction is evidence of progress. Experimentation helps establish causal relationships, avoiding the correlation fallacy. Unsatisfactory hypotheses are either modified or discarded. If the hypothesis survives testing, it may become adopted into the framework of a scientific theory. Scientific theory. Scientific theories are logically reasoned, self-consistent models or framework for describing the behavior of natural phenomena. A theory typically describes the behavior of much broader sets of phenomena than a hypothesis. Commonly, a large number of hypotheses can be logically bound together by a single theory. Thus, a theory is a hypothesis explaining various other hypotheses. In that vein, theories are formulated according to most of the same scientific principles as hypotheses. In addition to testing hypotheses, scientists may also generate a model, namely an attempt to describe or depict a phenomenon in terms of a logical, physical, or mathematical representation, and to generate new hypotheses that can be tested based on observable phenomena. While performing experiments to test hypotheses, scientists may have a preference for one outcome over another, and so it is important to ensure that science as a whole can eliminate this bias. This can be achieved by careful experimental design, transparency, and a thorough peer review process of the experimental results as well as any conclusions. After the results of an experiment are announced or published, it is normal practice for independent researchers to double-check how the research was performed, and to follow up by performing similar experiments to determine how dependable the results might be. Taken in its entirety, the scientific method allows for highly creative problem-solving while minimizing any effects of subjective bias on the part of its users, especially the confirmation bias. This has been adapted from Wikipedia. God of the gaps. Atheists contend God is not needed as a proposition. Their claim suggests any observation can be explained without reference to an existent God. A corollary of this is their claim that what science does not explain ought not to be explained using the God hypothesis, as this would constitute a resort to a God of the gaps theory, meaning God is just being used to fill in the blanks science has not yet managed to explain. This is disingenuous for several reasons. not the least of which is that scientists cannot claim one hypothesis is more of a gap filler than the other, without objective verification of this claim. The fact that mechanics can fix cars but not windshields is not to say the windshield repair person is just a gap filler. The reality is that automotive repair people do not fix windscreens, and natural science as construed does not explain all observations. There is more unexplained by science than explained, so the gaps really are the greater expanse, and science is simply an ad hoc way of explaining certain phenomena. Science cherry-picks what problems it will try to solve, while leaving many others untouched or poorly explained. Science is natural science. Empirical science is methodology designed to confirm its bias for natural explanations. So far as empirical science is concerned, all observations are made with the five senses, and all that is observed with the five senses can be explained using observable components of nature. A natural explanation is one that references only matter, energy, space, and time. An explanation that addresses anything other than matter, energy, space, and time is deemed unscientific. Modern science based on matter, energy, space, and time thinking creates circular reasoning and confirmation bias. Facts and belief. Atheists make a distinction between faith and facts. This is simply their way to divide goats from sheep by saying while Christians believe in Christ, atheists are knowledgeable and have no need to believe anything. This is a belief. Empiricism cannot empirically demonstrate a verified truth is true, nor can empiricists devise an experiment that would prove empiricism is the only way of discerning truth. Atheists have faith in science. They think this faith is corroborated and justified, but they have no method of proving this belief is anything other than a belief. What is God? How likely is it that science will discover what it does not understand nor can define? Science, regardless of its claim to objectivity, is not something done in the absence of man. How probable is it that science will find what it is not looking for, cannot define, and does not understand? If God is defined as a supernatural being, and supernatural beings are defined by their incapacity to be the subjects of scientific research, how probable is it that a scientist will attempt to fashion a proof of God? But is God actually supernatural? What does that even mean? What is nature? Ought we not to define nature before we define God in terms of it? God is indeed omniscient and all-powerful and absolutely good, but these are not terms useful within the lexicon of science. God to be God must be supreme, but too many see the supremacy of God in terms of matter, energy, space, and time. God is supreme in terms of logic and reason and information. God is the key to all understanding. God is a concept central to all logic and understanding. Accepting the existence of God is key to understanding reality. God is the first proposition, the ultimate axiom, the key proposition from which all other information is derived. The nature of nature. God is deemed incompatible with empirical science because empirical science is a method of verifying observation made in a reality of matter, energy, space, and time using the five senses. The downside to this, or the unscientific component of this, is that God is rejected as a topic of science because a proof of God would not confirm that reality is composed of matter, energy, space, and time. We have to look at modern science as an exercise in confirmation bias. The object of science is to demonstrate only matter, energy, space, and time exist. Science has become an exercise in confirmation bias. A certain type of scientist has unilaterally decided they would remake science and redefine the scientific method into an agenda to prove the non-existence of God, or at best, the irrelevance of God. But science cannot prove its conception of reality is valid. Indeed, from the time of the Greeks, the material conception of reality has been under constant revision and retreat. Where is the scientific proof that reality exists as matter, energy, space, and time? Is empirical science able to disprove matter, energy, space, and time explanations? Can the assumption reality equals matter, energy, space, and time be refuted empirically? The big bogus claim of atheism. Atheists claim they only reject all claims based on supernatural elements. At best, this is disingenuous. Atheists eliminate the possibility that supernatural claims can be proven using their models and rules. Atheists stack the deck against Christians. Atheists expect Christians to use the tools developed to exclude references to anything but matter, energy, space, and time. When Christians cannot provide evidence for God using the methods that exclude all but matter, energy, and space and time observations, atheists think this supports their position. In any discussion about God, atheists want to serve as debater, judge, scorekeeper, and umpire, and the source of all rules. What is the supernatural? Atheists claim reality is composed of matter, energy, space, and time. So anything other than matter, energy, space, and time is not natural, but supernatural. Because atheists deal with reality, they say all explanations are about matter, energy, space, and time. So only natural factors need to be considered. If reality is natural, then of course nothing outside of reality is natural, and thus is not real. These things outside of nature are said to be supernatural or simply imaginary. Logically this is true, but their premise is false, so the conclusion becomes irrelevant. Two realities. Truth is not founded on assumptions, but on provable facts. Some facts are derived from experimentation, but experiments are often restricted to what is measurable using physical units of measure. Modern science has carefully constructed a physical reality composed of an interlocking and constructive measurements, all based on the belief that what is being measured was real, that is, composed of matter, energy, space, and time. Space is composed of measurements of distance, time is composed of measures of energy, that is, periodic events. Energy is composed of matter and time, or what is called mass and matter, is space or volume and time. There is nothing behind the facade. Truth. Science is said to be the search for truth. God is truth. Theoretically, science ought to be seeking God. There is a thing called objective truth, which some say is a truth that is independent of the observer. This assumes an independent reality that is there, regardless of it being observed or not. If an odometer reads 103,302 miles, then that is an objective measure of distance traveled. But what is a mile but a subjective and even arbitrary labeling of length? The same goes for all of our measures. Quantification does not even exist except as a concept. Numbers are human-contrived elements. Numbering is not found in nature. Quantification. The whole issue of if God's existence can be proved or not is based on if the supernatural is in any sense objective, and thus in turn rests on a question of if the supernatural can be quantified. But what is quantity but an arbitrary designation of an observation under controlled conditions? We decide at what point a mile ends and another begins. How much do we observe? Is gravity ever seen? Is distance or speed or time or any other phenomenon other than the physical object observed? We observe effects. In truth, we do not even observe physical phenomena. We observe the effect of light photons bouncing off of atomic waves. The observation itself is just more photons bouncing off other atomic waves. But these effects can be and are quantified. they can be given a value. Light has wavelengths and vibrational frequencies. If distance can be quantified, why not value? Value. God is the measure of value. God is omniscient and all-powerful, and good and truth, because God is the measure of all value. All that God is and does is good, because all that God is and does is defined as good, because God defines what is good. God is the measure of all things with value, because God is the measure of value. The love of money is the root of all kinds of evil, because the love of money replaces the love of God as the measure of value. We cannot observe God directly any more than we can observe gravity, or clouds, or dark matter, or love, or honesty, or consciousness. To find mass, we have to be able to measure it. To find distance, we have to be able to measure it. To find God, we need to measure God. The law of quantification, 2 Corinthians 10:13. But we will not boast of things without our measure, but according to the measure of the rule which God hath distributed to us, a measure to reach even unto you. Ephesians 4:7. But unto every one of us is given grace according to the measure of the gift of Christ. God is the measure of value, and he measures out our faith. But we cannot measure him but with the measure we are given. We cannot measure distance with weight, nor can we measure time with a cup. We cannot measure God, that which is alien to him. Nothing can be measured but by the units that compose it. Introduction to the experiment. To see God, one has to look for him. We cannot see God in anything other than the value he creates. If we do not value a sunset, we cannot see God in it. However, real value, or objective value, is contained in economics. It is within economic theory that the evidence for God can best be found. God, as the measure of value, creates value if followed. The Bible divides people into sheep and goats. These are believers and unbelievers, but they are also a test group and a control group. The contest is between the church and Babylon. The quantification of value. Our purpose and our desire is to increase value. We need not define value other than as the market value of goods and services produced per TL, where L is any political jurisdiction and T is the time period considered. The simple plot of the experiment is based on the reduction of social costs. Social costs are those costs that reduce the value of the target group. Simply put, the experiment pits the church against Babylon to see which group can produce the most value in the shortest possible time. This would involve science, technological development, and the specialization of labor, all factors in successful economic development. The experiment explores which group generates more heat, wasted effort, and costs relative to productive activity. The church. A crucial element in the experiment is, of course, the test group. Without a test group, the experiment is not possible. The control group is, of course, all those who do not participate as part of the test. The church is based on the factors provided for in our discussion, faith and works. To build the church, the test subjects must be obedient to Christ. This requires the promotion of the positive Reformation. In short, the church in its building divides from the world of Babylon, otherwise known as the control group. Just as there is a sharp line of distinction between sheep and goat, there is a line between the church and Babylon, and between test and controls. Works done in faith. All the experiment attempts to do is show conventional markets have more social costs than churches. Therefore, churches produce more value than conventional markets do. Building the church is an act done in faith. Building up the church is producing value for Christians, for we are the church. To do this, we need to fashion a church as close to the biblical model as is possible. For this, we need to renew the Reformation. We need to systematically separate from this fallen world completely. Works done in faith are those acts done specifically to assist the people of God so as to reduce and eventually eliminate all need for the fallen world. For more information, to set up the experiment or to participate in it, the Church needs to remove itself from the secular realm. The Reformation never went far enough. We need to renew it. The Church can immediately set about making itself, as a body of believers, separate from Babylon. Think along the lines of the Mennonites or Amish, but in a fully modern and technologically advanced setting. More information is available on this at our social positivist website, socialpositivist.com, and in our book, The Scientific Proof of God, on Amazon. Find us on Facebook and join the discussion. Social Positivism. If you have any questions or would like more information, please see our website or our Facebook page. You can link to our website from our Facebook page, Social Positivism. Thank you.